Blue didn't know what made him wake up at the crack of dawn, especially after the miles and his family had flown the day before. They'd been exhausted flying from the Amazon to Rio in nearly a single day. They were trying to make it to the pre-carnival party Pedro and Nico held every year, 2 days before Carnival. And when the Sphinx Bacall family finally arrived at their birdhouse in the late evening, they all entered their respective rooms and immediately fell asleep. The pre-carnival party would be the day after tomorrow, in the late evening. Half asleep, Blue's hazelnut eyes drifted down to its beautiful mate who slept peacefully beneath his wing, and her head rested on its feathery chest. A warm, loving smile curved on his beak at the sight of her sleeping form and planted a kiss on her crest feathers. She moaned and further cuddled his chest as a response to his kiss. And even though his fatigued body was begging him to go back to sleep, Blue thought back to how blessed he was to have a caring, gentle, and brave mate such as Jewel and 3 kids Rome he loved with all his heart. He was blessed and he was happy. Life was good and he couldn't wait for Carnival. Blue yawned and rested his head on top of Jules, his body relaxing as he closed his eyes, his mind slowly giving into sleep once more. Then, Blue! A voice called loudly. Tulio's voice, he realized. Blue, are you there? It's the crack of dawn. What could he possibly want? He grumbled inwardly, hoping the vet's shout hadn't wakened the kids. Blue! Tulio called again. Blue sighed lightly and lifted his head from Jules, blinking the exhaustion and blurriness away from his eyes as he put his annoyance on Tulio's obnoxious shout on a tight leash. Because if there's one thing he knew about Tulio, it's that he would always have something important to say, especially when he called out to him. Still, he was really tempted to just ignore the avian vet and go back to sleep. But before he could decide, Jewel began shifting in her sleep, cuddling his chest once more and slightly unfurling her wings as she let out a small sound of annoyance. Her eyes closed. She asked, Is that Tulio, Blue? Yes, it is, he said, reluctantly tucking his wing back into his side. How goes Senseo? What he wants, honey. Go back to sleep, okay? Upon him removing his wing from her, Jewel's body shifted uncomfortably against his, as if she were already missing the warmth of him. Lifting her head from his chest, her eyes barely opening as she met his gaze. He can wait until later, Blue. I know. He gave her a quick peck on the beak. But it might be something important. She sighed. Fine, but hurry back, please. She tucked herself into her own wing, closing her eyes. Blue stood to his talons, smiling as he gazed at his mate. I'll be back in a few seconds, honey. He quickly preened himself before stepping out onto the porthole of his birdhouse. And immediately, he noticed a thick fog blackening everything from his view. He couldn't even see Tulio from where he was perched. Only the silhouettes of trees, branches, and vines were visible in the fog. And he wondered if he should reconsider trying to glide down to Tulio. Maybe I should take Jules' advice and just go back to sleep. Meet Tulio later in the morning. Blue! Can you hear me? Tulio called out, his voice slightly louder than before. But Blue noticed that there was a certain edge to his tone, one that was full of pain. It really must be important then. Blue responded to Tulio with a squawk, Rah! Hopping onto the wooden platform, looking down over the edge. He silently cursed when he found himself unable to see even the jungle floor. Suddenly, Blue saw a light pierce through the fog, its beam aimed right at him. It was a flashlight. Blue realized a flashlight that Tulio was shining in his direction, as if he knew of his situation, or perhaps that was the case. That's smart, Tulio, Blue thought. He spread his wings, hopping off the platform before going into a slow, cautious glide, following the light Tulio was shining. When he was close to the source of the light, he let out another squawk and slowed his gliding to a halt, flapping his wings in midair until Tulio put out his arms, allowing him to perch. He was careful of his claws piercing the human skin. Blue squawked in greeting, facing Tulio, a half-forced smile on his beak. He hoped whatever the bird doctor had to tell him was worth waking up at the crack of dawn for. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for waking you up so early, Blue. The bird doctor began, and once again, Blue noticed how strained his voice sounded, as if he's been sobbing earlier. Blue felt his heart pulse a few beats faster than usual, and Tulio continued saying, "But there is something I need to tell you." Jewel awoke from her light sleep when she heard the flapping of wings and a small tap from outside. She smiled when she saw her husband, mate, hop through the porthole of the birdhouse, furling in his wings as he shook off the morning mist from his feathers. "Hey, honey," she greeted, untucking herself from her own wing a brow raise. That took a little longer than a few seconds. Blue chuckled nervously, rubbing at the back of his neck. Sorry, Jewel. Tulio just had a lot to inform me about. It was nothing too important." Jewel unworthily rolled her eyes. "I knew it. That human had a knack for babbling about facts and logic she cared nothing about, and she was willing to bet that most of what he told Blue had to do with their occasional checkups. She cringed at the thought of those checkups, particularly her first one, when Tulio had to lift her tail without warning and whipped a cool, wet swab over a cloaca, causing her to gasp in horror. She would have torn the avian doctor face apart if it weren't for Blue stopping her and explaining to her what Tulio was exactly doing, somewhat calming her down. But despite the fact that he had to come to the human's defense, she still remembered the harsh glare Blue gave Tulio as he tucked a protective wing around her, not appreciating that the human had touched her in such an appropriate way. She found it strangely attractive and could have helped but cuddle into him, enjoying the sense of safety and protection he gave her. So similar to how her father would when she was young. Tulio had simply apologized, saying that he'd give them a warning next time. Jewel assured to Blue softly, a warm smile on her beak. "It's fine, sweetie." Then she patted the empty side of the nest with her wing. "Now, come and cuddle with me, handsome. We at least have a few hours before the kids wake up." But Blue tucked his wing back into his side and lowered his head, his eyes darkening with something bleak and suffocating as he said, "Actually, Jewel, I'm going to get our breakfast early. If that's fine with you. I don't think I'll be able to fall back to sleep." It was his tone and the tragic gleam of his eyes that had her expression becoming one of concern. She stared at him for a long moment before she gave him a soft, "Okay," and then said, "But are you all right, Blue?" At her question, Blue blinked, snapping his head up, the darkness vanishing from his eyes. He gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and said, Of course, honey. I'll be back soon, okay? Jewel blinked, still worried, confused. What did Tulio tell him exactly? She wanted to ask him so she could know what was bothering her beloved mate. But for some reason, for some unknown reason, she stopped herself. She instead pressed her beak into a thin line and nodded silent. Blue's smile widened and he hopped over to her, pecking her on the beak again. Through this time, Jewel kissed him back, tilting her head as she deepened the kiss, a meek sound escaping her when he slipped his tongue into her beak. Blue then broke the kiss, his beak departing from hers, but still, Jewel pecked him on the beak once, twice, thrice, before she breathed out, running her wingtips down his neck. Be careful, Blue, please. She gazed into his beautiful hazel eyes, and she felt tears burn in her own, though she didn't know why. I will, honey, I will, he assured, pressing another kiss to her beak. I will. I promise. He then quickly made his way to the porthole of the birdhouse and hopped out, spreading his wings, and he flew out to the jungle of Rio. Jewel only stared after him, a feeling of anxiety gnawing at her stomach, making her heartbeat increase just slightly. It was her instincts, she realized, the only thing she trusted above her mate, above her father. Something was wrong, and she didn't like it. Jewel took a deep, long breath and exhaled through her nose, swallowing a lump in her throat. She just prayed after he would return to her safe. She did. She didn't even want to imagine a life without him, didn't even want to consider it. She loved him with all her heart. By the by, a single question continued to echo through her mind. What did Tulio tell him exactly?